Hi everybody, thank y'all so much for being here. Super excited to put this on. Obviously DEI is a very important topic and a lot of people have very passionate feelings about it. So I think it's great to just get this in front of everybody, to allow it to be discussed, allow it to, everybody to see everybody's perspective. We have two fantastic speakers here to kind of engage in this conversation. We have Mbye Njie, class of 2019. And we have Mbye Njie, class of 2004. So just a little bit about him. Mbye is, like I said, 2019 graduate. He majored in mathematics. He's currently the executive director of the Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse. He was previously the president of Color Us United, whose mission is to serve as the voice of those who oppose dividing America by race, religion, and sexual orientation, along with other characteristics. He has challenged Harvard University for discrimination against Asian Americans, has worked with the director for media outreach against California Proposition 16 race preferences, and has written for national publications like the Wall Street Journal, City Journal, the Federalist, the Daily Signal, and the Washington Examiner. He is the author of An Inconvenient Minority and School of Woke: How Critical Race Theory Infiltrated American Schools and Why We Must Reclaim Them. And Mr. Njie was born in Mbye. He's moved to the United States at the age of 7. He grew up in Macon, Georgia, and is, like we said, a Davidson graduate.
Macon. Excuse me. Yeah.
Macon.
You can get some things wrong, but not Macon.
You cannot get Macon wrong.
He's the founder of Legal Equalizer, an app that aims to help people in emergency situations, such as encounters with law enforcement and immigration authorities, providing a way to contact loved ones, record what has happened, and more. He's the co-founder of Bacon. I pronounced that right? I got that awesome. And the first innovator in residence at Davidson College. Mr. Njie recently finished his 4-year term on Davidson's alumni board and is an avid fan of the Wildcats and all things that is Davidson. Just a disclaimer, because we are live, none of this is sponsored. This is not affiliated with Davidson College. These opinions from everybody are their own. And I will go ahead and pass it off to these guys. Let's go ahead and give them a round of applause. And I know we're all going to be
All right. My name is Mbye Njie. I've been asked to prepare a 5-minute opening statement on why I think DEI is bad for society, especially our educational institutions. So, I'm going to place this mic closer to me here. First of all, thank you so much for bringing this here. This is the kind of debate that I think our school needs. And I just want to share with you my values regarding the issue of DEI. What do I value? I value personal liberty. Personal liberty, the freedom to be with who you want to be, generally do what you want to do. And I'm about to argue to you that DEI mostly diminishes personal liberty at Davidson educational institutions and beyond. Now, are there some things that I think should be compulsory? Yes. I'm not radical about it. There are aspects of compulsory education that everybody needs to learn. Everybody needs to learn algebra. Everybody needs to learn American history. Everybody needs to learn the second law of thermodynamics. But for DEI to get to that position of being compulsory, it has to make a very strong case, and it better make a very strong case. The reality is DEI is not an ideology that has the evidence backing it up to be vaulted into that kind of vaunted position of being a compulsory, mandated, the kind of thing that you see in your freshman orientation, the kind of thing that you see in seminars, the kind of thing that people are taught in their high schools. A Duke Chronicle study, Duke University, found that 43% of the faculty in 2024 leaned towards DEI was being emphasized too much at their university. Duke, where some of the most liberal professors are in the nation, 43% of them felt that DEI was being emphasized too much. 23% said that it was too little. So that was a change from 2022, when most employees thought that DEI was a good thing. And I'm here to tell you that DEI has gone too far in 3 ways. 1, DEI has become authoritarian. In 2021, my former nonprofit, Color Us United, discovered the Salvation Army's document, a mandatory diversity training called Let's Talk About Racism. Let's Talk About Racism asked Salvation Army workers to lament and repent for their racism and prejudice. It said that Salvation Army officers should stop trying to be colorblind and admit to racism. The trainings were required, but minorities were given exceptions. So if you were a minority, you could skip a Salvation Army training, but if you're a white person, you couldn't. So racism was defined as being from a white person to a person of color, not the other way around. And that's not the thing that I believe in. I believe that racism is against anybody, not just whites, people of color, but people of color to other people of color, and yes, some people of color to whites as well. These kinds of things are not the kinds of things that should be put on trainings. They should not be mandatory. They should be something that if somebody wants to go to, fine, but they shouldn't be imposed on people. This is an ideology, and in particular, number 2, it is a divisive ideology. It leads to a spirit of divisiveness. The same Duke Chronicle survey that I shared with you also said that while DEI was mostly faced with approval from black Duke students, it is true, they typically rated it 8 out of 10, Asian students rated DEI policies 4.5 to 6 out of 10. It was notably more unpopular with whites and Asians, and especially Asians, than with black students. Any ideology that purports to be the voice of unifying America should have broad unifying characteristics. And the fact is, if a minority group broadly rejects this ideology, it's not a unifying ideology. Finally, DEI is inefficient. $168 billion were administered by the Biden administration to submit to federal equity grants that were given out to various DEI trainings, and the Department of Defense worker was cited saying most of that came during last February's military stand-down, when defense employees were at varying times of their month stopped their activities to have a conversation about race, violent extremism, and the importance of an apolitical military. And I'll leave it to you to decide, and I think we're going to have an interesting debate tonight, but I think that that kind of money and that kind of focus is too much for a government and for a people that should be focused on making a better America. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'd like to start this by, admitting that I think this discussion is actually pretty silly, considering we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, I'm not going to use the word DEI because that's a cop-out to not say the word diversity. I don't like diversity. It gives people the right to say I don't like equity. It gives the right to say I don't like inclusion. Just think about that. So we're going to discuss how we started this whole thing. So when I responded to the email, it was the email where Katie sent out thanking President Trump for getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the federal level and making a merit-based thing, right? And so we're talking about merit. And as we talk about merit, I sit there and watch the same people that talk about merit name the weekend anchor for Fox News as our defense secretary. The same people that talk about merit then go and name an environmental scientist as our health and human services secretary. We have a podcast host that's number 2 in our FBI, who's never worked in the FBI before. We're talking about merit. We fired a 4-star general as the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was almost unanimously approved, for a 3-star general who needed a waiver to get the job. And so they want to talk about merit at that level. So now we're going to talk about, so that's the federal level. We can discuss that, about what is merit and who actually has earned what and who hasn't earned their positions. So that was a debate that started this thing. Now, if you want to talk about schools and education, academics, and things like that, we have plenty of examples from Kenny himself that tells you the real reason why Asian students were getting into Harvard in UNC and other high-level schools. He's talked about it before. He knows the answer. It's legacy students. Legacy students, the students who our parents are teachers there, and whose parents are donors at Harvard. They made up 43% of the admissions, not the black and brown people. Let's look at the athletes at Harvard as well, that, do rowing and sailing and those sports. That's who was taking the positions away from Asian Americans. And I've heard him on podcasts, I've read his writings where he's discussed that. But his group did not go after those people, because I've looked to see if they had one lawsuit after them. I haven't seen one yet. I checked on Google, Safari, all the search engines, even ChatGPT, couldn't find one. So that is that aspect of that level. So we'll prove that end of things on that end. And finally, thinking about talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion at Davidson to me is almost laughable. To think that it's hurt this college when it's done nothing but better this college. Because for 125 years, the only people allowed this college were white men. Black men were allowed to build this college. We've got buildings with the fingerprints of them still, who put the bricks on these buildings out here. They were then asked to be the people that fed them. They washed their clothes. They were dorm guys, but they weren't smart enough to get here. So in the previous 125 years, you didn't think we had any merits to get here. We didn't qualify to get here. But from the first black person admitted here, who's now a doctor in France, we've outkicked our coverage at this school. And then let's not talk about the women who've contributed to this school. And let's add the A in DEI for accessibility, people that are handicapped that have contributed to this school. So when you even look at Davidson College, how many of y'all would know Davidson College without somebody like Steph Curry? Last time I checked, that's diversity. That's equity, that's inclusion. If you're a first generation student at Davidson, you're in what they're talking about. If you're an athlete at Davidson, you're in what they're talking about. And every metric so far has shown that has done nothing but help Davidson become a better college. Ever since we've integrated the school, ever since we admitted women to this school, ever since we allowed gay people to come to this school, Jews to come to this school, other religions, we've done nothing but improve this school. We've added to the endowment, we've added to the legacy, and guys, go Google the 5, 10 most famous Davidsonians. Just do that. Google them. I guarantee you that the DEI people they're talking about, I'll kick their coverage in those numbers. So I look forward to this discussion at a federal level, at a school level, and at a local level at Davidson College. Thank you.
Okay, so I was asked to ask questions, and then I'm going to give a response. I ask a question, he gives a response, he asks a question to me. So that's how it's going to work. So there's a proverb from Jesus, and Jesus says, when you ask for a fish, would someone give you a snake? And I believe in that. And I believe that that's related to DEI, because none of us here are opposed to diversity. Obviously, I am very well aware of the fact that I am a minority in America. There's no question about it. I'm very well aware that this room is filled with minorities, and we're thankful for their accomplishments. We're also, by the way, thankful for the country that allows minorities to come in from all walks of life and all places and gives them a chance here. If there's nothing that America isn't about, that's what it is. America is about diversity. There's no question. But we're talking about policies here. Diversity cannot be forced. You cannot force diversity, okay? That's the thing. If you try to force diversity, you're basically asking everybody to be the same. And not everybody is the same. People have different talents. People have different skills. And the Harvard case is an example of that, because Harvard is an academic institution. So an academic institution cannot admit people who are lower in academics, significantly lower, because the people who are good at the academics, that worked really hard or had the innate skill to get there, are left out. And that's discrimination. I don't believe in discrimination, but when Asian students are asked to score 270 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission, that's a problem, as a black student, by the way. Okay, so my question to you is, we all agree that diversity is an important part of the world, but what specific diversity policies do you endorse at this school?
What diversity policy do I endorse at this school?
Yeah.
Whatever policy they've got going on currently seems to be working great for Davidson right now, considering this school is the highest ranked it's been in the history of our school, and endowment's the largest it's ever been, and students' graduation rates are higher for students of all colors, where it used to not be that way when I was here as a student. When I got here, black students didn't have as high of a graduation rate. We left Davidson at a higher rate because we didn't have programs to make us feel welcome here. We weren't given stuff that helped us to feel here. And now that gap has virtually closed. We don't have a gap now between the white and black graduation rate. We now have black students that feel welcome here, that feel supported and have access to things here. And I don't understand how them getting support and getting access to help them be more successful is harmful to other students. Like, I don't see how that takes away from your education or from any other student's education. Because from what I see, Davidson providing for all the students as it should. Okay, so my question will go, let's see, where do we start here? My question is, are there any specific Davidson students, faculty, or staff that you think are just plain DEI hires that aren't qualified, that did not earn their jobs, their positions, or their admission to this college?
Okay, so I expected this question. I expected this question. The diversity, first of all, I don't view DEI hire as a pejorative, as necessarily a pejorative. I know some of the right wing views it as a pejorative, yada, 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 et cetera. If your job is to improve diversity, equity, inclusion at the school, I want you to improve the true meaning of those terms at this school. So, does Davidson have a director of DEI? Yes, we do. She's a DEI hire. Does Davidson have a dean of DEI to students? Yes, she's a DEI hire. But I'm going to evaluate her, if I were her boss, which I'm not, I would evaluate her based on her ability to generate that kind of freedom, that level of diversity of every background in thought, intellect, bring debates like this to happen, and generally increase the level of intellectual background diversity so that people are learning more. Okay. I disagree with the idea that Davidson has nothing to improve with regards to its diversity policies. There is compulsion, and there has been documented compulsion at Davidson. Whether it is an anti-racism seminar where the athletes had to watch a video that said, "I am racist, am I?" and an Asian student is asked in that video, what if there's racism against a white person, and then the interlocutor in that video says, "That's not racism, that's bigotry." I think that that's a compulsive seminar. Those things have to go. There are currently statements in faculty statements that you have to ask, how are you improving diversity and inclusion? Give me a diversity statement. Well, that reads like a political litmus test. If you're a professor applying to be a math or science professor at Davidson, it should be about how good are you at teaching math, how good are you at your research. It shouldn't be asking you what your political views are. So those are two things I automatically already disagree with the status quo at Davidson. So let me ask you a question. If Davidson is so good and so bright at implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion, then how do you speak to that frustration? Are the people who reported and talked about this, and when these became controversial issues, should these people's concerns be dismissed?
Well, here's the issue. When you talk about that video, you don't talk about why that video was needed to be in the first place, right? It was because a student was walking around here calling other students the N-word. That's why the video started. It wasn't forced by faculty, it was a student group that decided to play that video because another student had seen the video somewhere else to have a discussion about it. So it didn't come out of anywhere. Like, it came from a student being racist on campus towards other students and student groups saying, let's have this discussion together. And secondly, we're in an academic setting, right? So if a video uses the academic definition of what racism is, I'm sorry if the other students get mad they don't understand what the academic definition of racism is. Like, we had this argument when I was an anthropology major 20 years ago, because Dr. Fairley, and I argued with her at that point, and she was like, no, here's the definition of racism taken up with anthropologists and other academics. So if we're at a school that's an academic school, why are people upset when we use the academic definition of what racism is, whether or not you disagree with it? So if we're going to talk about that video making people feel uncomfortable, how about the people that have called the N-word? How'd they feel? Were they uncomfortable? Like, are we more worried about them watching that video and having that discussion, or the people that had the racist actions put upon them to begin with? Because if they didn't have that, we wouldn't have the video to begin with in the first place.
I'm worried because the definition of racism is not a definition of racism that I agree with. The video said the definition of racism was whites against POC.
And you don't have to agree with that, but the academic definition is the academic definition, and we're in an academic environment. And so we're going to use academic definitions in academic environments. Like, that's what it is. Like, you don't have to agree with the definition. A lot of people didn't agree with the definition. That was the point of that discussion. Even black people at that discussion didn't agree with that definition as well.
Okay.
So there were a lot of people that didn't agree with the definition, but the academic definition is the academic definition of the word, and that can't be changed whether or not we disagree with it, unless we want to take it up with anthropologists and other academics who've been studying it way longer than we have.
It is not the academic definition. It is an academic definition.
Okay, well, an academic definition in it.
And it's important to know where that academic definition comes from. The idea that racism is whites against POC comes from the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, invented by Herbert Marcuse, who said, liberating tolerance, in order to have liberating tolerance, you have to repress right-wing tolerance in order to facilitate left-wing tolerance. It's an inherently divisive worldview. That's why I don't support it.
So which teachers of Davidson are teaching at Frankfurt School of View?
A lot of them. An English class that I took in junior year. Now, he wasn't saying I endorse it, but he taught it.
And are you against teaching different points of views in an academic situation so you can figure out which point of view you support? Do you only have to teach one point of view? Can you not teach things you disagree with? Opposite points of views? Because that's what I thought college was about, right? Being taught different points of views and then coming to your own conclusion about which point of view you agree with and disagree with. So is there something wrong with them teaching different points of views that maybe you disagree with?
And the most recent FIRE survey of Davidson, 61% of students surveyed said they feel uncomfortable speaking up in front of a teacher of a disagreeing opinion in class. So yeah, I think that there is a cultural, there is an inhibition to that.
And can we go further? What are they disagreeing on?
The definition of racism.
And so why do they feel uncomfortable talking about it?
For a lot of reasons, the feeling that there is a large left-wing point of view created by the faculty, the feeling that they face judgment among their peers. Also, sometimes it appears directly in the syllabi. There are some syllabi elements that said there was a theater professor that said that the disagreements will be handled in the order of need, and the need was based on the intersectionality framework. So it wasn't based on the order of justice. What's the most just thing to do is based on the order of where are you in the intersectionality framework. So that's actually in a policy, but yeah. I asked you a question. We kind of went back and forth. You can ask me a question.
All right, so let's get back to the actual definitions of what we're discussing here. So when we discuss the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion, what do you define that as? What is your actual definition of what that means to you?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a specific set of policies, okay? I view things it's not I view things in policies. You have to consider not just what the term means on its own, but how it's actually enacted. And by and large, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the university setting and the corporate setting is enacted through affirmative action in admissions, or race preferences, whatever you want to call it, diversity trainings, statements asked of faculty members or people who are hired, and those kinds of things, and then also positional stances, what the president and the administrator feels is important to say. So yes, those are. So when I say diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm not talking about, and I think everybody is here because they inherently understand this. Like, I don't debate that America is a diverse country. I debate the policies. So let me ask you a question. You grew up in Macon, Georgia, and as you know, Macon is a wonderful city, a city that I've been to. It's, there's a large black population there, as it is in Atlanta. Atlanta has recently become known as kind of a great, not a great place, but a place where a lot of black Americans are moving to. They're moving from the Northeast and the West to Georgia. They're moving back to Atlanta, they're moving back to Macon. Why are those things happening in these supposedly right-wing Republican states that you were very firmly attacking at the start of your presentation?
Because those cities are as blue as it can get. That's why. Atlanta is like the best city for black people to have opportunity in the country. We have the most black entrepreneurs, the highest amount of black millionaires. We have the highest amount of black wealth. Same thing with Macon. So, black people do better in blue cities. You can't name me a red city where black folks are just swimming in wealth right now. All these are blue cities.
Black people do better in Detroit. Black people do better in New York City.
Blue city.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah, we're talking about blue
they're
cities.
moving away from those places to Atlanta.
But the numbers are Atlanta, yes. Atlanta has the most. I live in Atlanta. I live in downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
I'm Atlanta through and through, as well as Macon, Georgia. I understand why people live there and move there. And it's because that's the history of Atlanta. And also because Atlanta, the reason Atlanta has such a high black population, because diversity, equity, and inclusion actually worked for Atlanta. So we had our mayor back in the day. He's the one that got Delta to move from Birmingham, Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia. Why? Because he forced Delta to make sure they had a certain amount of black employees working there. He also made sure that if you were a Fortune 500 company, you had to have a certain amount of black banks and other black people that were in your C-suites. That's what lifted the black population of Atlanta to have the biggest and best black middle class in the country. So if you want to talk about Atlanta and get Atlanta history, that's not the right argument for you to use, because we are the perfect example of why diversity, equity, and inclusion has helped to uplift a city. And also, our economy in Atlanta is bigger than the three or four states around it. Our economy is bigger than South Carolina, bigger than Alabama, bigger than Tennessee, our city alone. So yes, that diversity, equity, and inclusion, just like in businesses, where most businesses are more diverse, make more money, just like our city is more diverse, we make more money. And we carry the rest of those red cities and red towns around our state. That gets carried by Atlanta, Macon, Savannah, Columbus, Augusta, all blue cities.
Okay, I'll give a counter argument to that. San Francisco is the most liberal city in America. What percentage of it is black? 7%. 7%. Tiny black population. Black people generally do not move to San Francisco. Extremely high cost of living. Extremely progressive, but it's not just the progressive. It's just the fact that the economy there is genuinely a two-tiered economy. In a place where you have free markets, and Atlanta, you have 40% black population. I think that's great. I think that's amazing. But I think people really have to consider, really need to think, and I'm not telling you what to think, I'm telling you my argument. My argument is that cities can't be too progressive, because if they're too progressive, then they really scare off the black population. And I'm not treating them as victims or anything like that. I'm talking about how they move with their own feet. Right.
So my question is, you keep talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion being policies, right? I want to ask you, why were those policies needed in the first place? What happened in history that made us have to have these policies to begin with?
Racism. I'm not scared to admit that. I'm not I'm not here to tell you that racism doesn't exist.
Then did it disappear somewhere? Did it just go away?
No, but we've gotten better.
In what metrics?
Well, that's a good question. How have we gotten better? That's a very interesting question. Look, if you went to Pew Research in the year 2008, asked white and black Americans, how do you feel about race relations today? Mostly positive, mostly negative. At the time, 2008, which is, when Barack Obama was elected president, black people and white people, 3/4 of them, said race relations were good to great. Scroll to today. 3 out of 10 black people feel the same way. 4 out of 10 white people feel the same way. We had an apex, we had a peak. We're not there anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with the opportunities, what was promised during the Obama presidency, what Obama said was going to happen to black people. He said in 12th grade, the black achievement rate, we're going to have 9 out of 10 of them hit proficient in standardized tests. Well, guess what? 3 out of 10 are proficient, black people are proficient in standardized tests in America today. That's a tragedy, but that is not a tragedy. That's a tragedy years in the making. And so if we're going to talk about DEI, eventually you got to look at results, and the results haven't been pretty. Okay, so okay, how about this? Do you think that critical race theory should be taught in schools?
It's taught in law schools for graduate students. I've never saw critical race theory as an elementary school student, as a middle school student, as a high school student, or Davidson student. Do we have a critical race theory class in Davidson? Anybody? Have you ever had one? So why are we even discussing that at this level when it's a law school level class that is taught in law schools? So, where is this critical race theory? What elementary schools are being taught at?
Okay, I'll read you a survey, and I'll ask you the same question again. Education Next did a survey in 2024, 850 high school students, found that 58% of the respondents, 58% of these high school students said that they were taught that America was a racist country, quote unquote, almost daily. Okay, almost daily. So if you were to ask me what critical race theory is, the number one thing that critical race theory asserts is that America is a racist country. If you don't take away anything else from this debate, take away that. That is what I'm saying. That is what I'm asking. Do you want students to be subjected to the idea that America is a racist country?
Has America had racism in its past? A ton of it? A good bit of it? Does it still have racism today?
Yeah.
So why do you not want students to learn about American history? You don't have to feel bad about American history. I'm not calling the students themselves. I'm not saying, hey, you were the one that held slaves. Oh, you're the one that sick dogs on them. I'm teaching you American history. Mm-hmm. So why should they take it personally if they didn't do it themselves? What's wrong with teaching proper and real and true American history?
Because it's exaggerated. That's why.
How's it exaggerated?
It's exaggerated because the way that it is taught suggests to young black people, young black men especially, that the situation that they can get out of is irreducible, is deterministic. You don't want to teach a deterministic version of your own future and your own life. No matter what you do, you're always going to be confronting and going and climbing through a racist gutter and a hellhole. Now imagine if you taught a young Hispanic or black or frankly an Asian child in an inner city ghetto who's already poor, they're already, status conscious, very driven, out of their tails, needs to move up. You're already teaching them, oh, and by the way, this country is also racist against you. I think that that's a bad way to teach the history of this country.
Who is telling that to young black men directly like that you don't have any hope? I was a young black man. My parents were history teachers. My mom taught college for 40 years, history. Mm-hmm. I never grew up thinking, oh my God, I have no chance in America because I'm young and black. No, they teach us the history of race in America to tell us how to handle the situation when you grow up. They teach us that history to tell us when the cop pulls you over, it's not going to be the same as when your white friend pulls you over. They teach you that to tell you that, hey, when you graduate from college, despite the fact that you're qualified, you might not get that job over somebody else that's unqualified.
Because of racism?
All this. Yes, there's stats that show.
Because of racism.
Yes, there are stats that show that white men without college degrees are more likely to get jobs than black people with college degrees. There are stats that show that white men with felonies are more likely to get callbacks than black people without criminal records. So yes, this is racism. It occurs. I know you don't want to believe it, and you don't have to, but it's real. It happens. It's America. And black people understand it. We live it. And even if it's not taught in school, guess what happens? Almost every black family, when you go home, your parents have stories to tell. Your grandparents have something to tell. Like, I've got all the stories from my mom's side of the family, of my uncle that went and fought in the war, came back. Could he get the GI Bill? No. He couldn't use that to get houses in the same place in California that some of his white soldiers did. What happened to that property value 30, 40 years later? That's generational wealth. So they teach us all this stuff to tell you how America has treated them and treated our families. It's not to tell us, oh, you can't do anything in life. No, because we've overcome, we've done that, but we also have to be aware because our circumstances are not the same as everybody else's circumstances in this country.
Okay. You talk about your history of racism, your own family history. Let me tell you a little bit about racism as well. The school board member in Montgomery County, Maryland, there's a advanced program for students there, an advanced program, and they were trying to change the admissions of the school program because, and of course they used diversity, equity, and inclusion language, but the reality is that advanced and gifted program happened to be 70% Asian. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they were preaching it as if, preaching the gospel, everything like that. The school board goes up, and the school board changes the policy. And immediately, the percentage of Asians plummets in that gifted program. It goes from 70% to 35%. And yes, were black students admitted a little bit higher? Yeah, from 2% to 3%. But it was the white students that gained, and the Asian students that lost out. But the name of the DEI, they were exhibiting this real racism towards Asians. And there was even caught, one school board member was even caught on a hot mic saying, yeah, they cheat. They cheat on the test. That's why they get in. And that's, you want to talk about racism? That's racism right there. But that's racism in the name of DEI. That's not racism that requires DEI. That's racism that people use DEI to create. Same thing at Harvard, same thing. It's the same old-fashioned racism in a new dress.
Why would it be called DEI when you said that the majority of the people that got in were white students?
Because they said it was DEI. They said we need equity. We need equity at Thomas Jefferson High School for mathematics. There's so many underrepresented minorities that are underrepresented at the school. And maybe that's true, but guess what? The Asians got into that school because they did well on tests. They were meritorious. The system said we should do a test, and they took the test and they got in, and some people were unhappy about it, and they decided they wanted to change it to make it less Asian. So they were racist, but they used diversity, equity, and inclusion language to justify it.
And was that the fault of the black students, that the 1% increase in black students that got in there?
Of course not. It was the policy's fault, and that's why I'm against DEI. How many more questions do we need to ask? Because I'm run out.
We can go to closing statements if y'all are both okay with that.
Well, what about audience stuff?
We'll have to closing statements.
Okay, closing statements. Do you want to go first? Should I go first? Okay. As I've said, and I've argued in this, DEI is not the principle. DEI is not the principle of diversity. DEI is not the principle of inclusion. DEI is a set of policies. DEI is a set of policies that include affirmative action, racial preferences, trainings, litmus tests, statements, all of these things that do not help foster a more inclusive and diverse climate. And I have the examples, and I've shared the examples with you guys to prove it. If DEI were so inclusive, why do people use DEI language to be racist against Asians? If DEI were so equitable, why are in the schools and the districts that are most progressive also have the lowest black graduation rates? Schools like in the New York City district, Maspeth High School, where 96% of the students there, mostly black, mostly Hispanic, graduate, but 0 out of 10 of them perform on the relevant proficiency of standardized exam. If DEI were so equitable and so inclusive, why would there be authoritarianism imbued within its blood? You have to read this. You have to watch this. Racism is one way. It's one direction. And the reality is it's because DEI is none of those things. DEI comes from a very specific set of values, critical theory set of values that inherently propositions a divided society. They don't want unity. They want division. Even the people who want unity within DEI, I would say, are being misled because the ideology itself is racist. We all want a better society. We all want a higher performing society. But if we want those things, we can't use DEI to get us there. At best, it is only going to get us to the exact same place. And at worst, it actually generates more division and less performance. That's why I'm opposed to DEI.
So thank you guys for showing up here. So my closing, kind of why I want to be here as well. So this discussion to me has been one that's been going on for a few years, but the name has just changed. It was woke a few years ago. Before that it was critical race theory. Now it's DEI. And even with like the Davidson Freedom of Thought and Discourse, we put this thing together, like their arguments have been the same for years. They just changed the words of the arguments, right? So when this group got founded, it was because Davidson changed their bylaws over who could be on the board of trustees and who could have that. And the group had disagreements with that over religious changes, right? Then the next time they sent a letter to Davidson was when Davidson hired 3 black faculty members in positions of leadership. They wrote a letter saying Davidson becoming too woke. Didn't look at their qualifications. Didn't look at the background of these guys. It was the school's becoming too woke. Had a meeting with Carol Quillen, the president at that time, over it. Those 3 members were the dean. We have our athletic director, Chris Clooney, who clearly has outkicked this coverage on his job since he's been hired. And the other guy is now the number 2 in the Federal Reserve. But they weren't qualified according to this group. And so when we talk about DEI and we want to say policy and all that stuff, the issue is right-wing media and culture has made that word and that terminology toxic. How? When you do things like take away a Black Medal of Honors page and put DEI Medal of Honor, as if he didn't earn it. As if he didn't go into battle and save 7 of his fellow soldiers while wounded. When you take away Jackie Robinson's page, to take that away, it's letting us know what you think DEI really means. It's letting us know what you really think it means, because you're not taking away from white soldiers. You're taking from women, from black soldiers, from Asian soldiers, from Native Americans. When they take away the Enola Gay because it has the word gay in it. You're taking away our history because of stupid things like that. So when we have DEI, that's why I was so adamant about getting the words and the things down, right? And also, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is fundamentally part of America's values. That's what America is about. Our thing, e pluribus unum, out of many one. That's diversity. What's our 14th Amendment? Equal protections for all. Equal protections for all. That's equity. Even when we said it pledges allegiance. On the flag, one nation, undivided, with liberty and justice for all. That's inclusion. So this isn't anything new. All we're doing is we're asking America to cash the check that it wrote all those years ago. Because for a lot of us, we didn't get those things that America promised back then. We didn't get that. Yep, slavery ended in 1865, but guess what? Here comes Jim Crow and Reconstruction. Here come all these other barriers to getting equality. We have, like I said, black soldiers who went to war and came back and couldn't get housing, couldn't go to college, couldn't go to schools. Davidson College right here. We know the descendants of people that built this school. They couldn't go here. They weren't able to come here. So for a while, America hasn't been equitable. It hasn't been fair to all of us. Even Asian Americans, their history, DEI is why we're even having this debate. It's why Asian Americans got rights here. Because the first law they passed was the Asian Exclusion Act, right? In 1882. And so, like, this argument is fundamentally, if you're arguing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're arguing against the fundamental values of what America truly is and what this country really is. And that's it.
Hi, thank you for this debate. I really appreciate it. Kenny, I like your point about digging into the data. I think that's important. So along those lines, I want to really focus in on specific policies at Davidson that are most important to those of us in the room. Along with that is recency. A lot of these concerns are from 2021, 2022, and they seem to have been addressed, mostly successfully, as DFTD has said in a few different statements. What ongoing policies at Davidson are you most concerned about, and do you think Davidson should address?
Okay, so there are a few, and I'm not sure, whether they're being addressed or not, and it comes to be seen whether they are, and I hope they are. But one of them is from the faculty level. From the faculty level, faculty are still asked, by and large, to supply a diversity statement in their faculty hiring in order to be hired. And how is this going? How is this anything but a shell game? You guys are Gen Z. You guys know we all know about this idea of a shell game, which is like I'm being asked to respond to a question that is vaguely about my morality level, but I have to answer it in this very specific way, in this way that has all of the lexicon and all of those kinds of things. Why can't this statement be about, let me open it up, what is your perspective on teaching? How do you do these kinds of things? How do you address problems within the classroom? Why does it have to be about, how do you create a more inclusive and diverse classroom? What if that professor's value isn't inclusion? If you're a professor, you're at the elite of the elite level. You're not exactly in an inclusive environment, nor should you be. The best mathematicians, we have protocols so that the best mathematicians have to be the best at math. That's necessarily exclusive. So I got a little passionate there. But faculty statements is something that is something we're working on. Institutional neutrality, another issue. Institutional neutrality. The whole idea, the current issues right now within the activist administrations, which I will not name, but activist administrations using their platform as a source of political leverage, that is inherently against what a balanced ideological discourse should be about. That's for sure. Those are two issues.
Can I ask a specific follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Do you feel like the Davidson administration has taken an activist stance or violated neutrality?
So you weren't here, but in 2015 there was a HB2, which was North Carolina's bathroom bill. It was about men in men's bathrooms, women in women's bathrooms, and I get it. You guys' stance on this, everything like that, but the president made a statement about that. Sent it to everybody. I know that's not the current president, but that's the example that comes to my head because I was a student.
Hey, yeah, those are like, these like actually for like the second one. Yes, like, yes, in terms of that, like actually, yeah, in terms of that, like we actually, it's an export versus statement. Yes, like, and also, yes, like these like a sort of teaching philosophy statement as well. Yes, like, and also in terms of that, these are sort of actually try to get at least like a sense, yes, in terms of that, like of like the candidates on like outlook and ability. At least to sort of like actually try to like implement like Davidson's like plan at least for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Now, let me stop you there, Ike. Then let me ask you a question. Why is 6% of Davidson professors Republican registered?
I have no idea.
You have no idea? Okay. I think it's because of a culture that inherently prioritizes we need liberal professors, or we're not going to hire somebody who doesn't believe in XYZ.
Yes, again, in terms of that, yes, in terms of that, at least, at least actually from my first-hand experience, yes, in terms of that, at least I'm actually trying to hire people. Again, in terms of that, that's not accurate. Like one again, yes, like, and also sort of actually when it comes to diversity, like equity, et cetera. Yes, in terms of that, and at least like in terms of that, like it is partly about race and also about like disability, et cetera, like as well. Yeah, so like here's what is my question again. Yes, like, and also in terms of that, like what you actually did not answer earlier. Yes, and then so sort of like which like black yes, in terms of that, like yes, like these are like Davidson students, like faculty, like our staff. Yes, in terms of that, like are not qualified to be here. Just so like which ones of us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said, and I'll say it again. I said I'm not qualified to make that judgment. I'm very, you know, I used to be a little more arrogant. I grant that, and I'll say that, and I'll admit that. You know, I used to think I know how to hire people. I know how to do these things. I don't. I'm very blessed. And I'm not the person who's going to make that call, but I hope that the person who makes that, my statement on that is I hope the person who makes that call sticks to principles that we can all agree on, or most of us agree on, rather than principles that are inherently divisive.
Yes, I can talk about actually just one something quick problem. That in terms of that, in terms of that, like your sort of entire argument, yes, in terms of that, like is sort of that DEI, in terms of that, like it's harmful, et cetera. Yes, like, and also the fact in terms of sort of that, these sort of like unqualified people. Yes, in terms of that, like are sort of actually taking spots, at least from sort of like deserving people. And so, you know, in terms of that, like if that's really your case, and then so, yes, and then so actually tell me, yes, in terms of that, yes, in terms of that, like which like black students, faculty, and staff, yes, in terms of that, like are not qualified to be here.
Okay, I'll answer that, and then hopefully Mbye can answer a few questions too. I just Don't mistake me for saying that I don't believe that some people are more deserving than others for a specific thing. I definitely also believe that. I believe that Asian students who deserve to get in to the top, to Thomas Jefferson High School for Mathematics, Harvard University, were being denied in favor of lower qualified students. Don't get me wrong on that. The scores show it, the academics show it, and the only thing that these Harvard admissions officers could rely on was this stupid personality score. Like, oh, Asians, they're not likable, they're not funny enough, you know, in the interview, that kind of thing. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're reading over and over again, and I don't think that that is something that could be done. So I do believe in that there are people, and that's why we need the data. That's why we need the data. Thank you.
I just want to ask a general question. Why are Asians so overrepresented in statistics? Why are Asians score such high ST scores? Why did that? Just want to ask you why is overrepresented in this demographic?
High two-parent family values. You know, it comes at a sacrifice. The moms and you know. By the way, if you just want to see how stark this disparity is, Asians whose parents make less than $60,000 a year, so poor Asians, score better than whites, blacks, and Hispanics whose parents make between $140,000 and $200,000 a year in New York City. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's unbelievable. That's incredible. And the reason why is because Asians study twice as many hours as the average American, and for a while that was, I guess it comes at the expense of their personality, but you know, you just, that's the kind of thing that should be taught, that everybody should figure it out, or at the very least, if not everybody figures it out, at least the people who do figure it out shouldn't be punished for it.
All right, I have a question. So, like you were talking about policies and stuff like that. Well, I guess I'll ask like a preliminary question. Like, would you agree that like structural racism or structural inequality exists, or at least has existed?
Duh.
All right, I think you think you wanted my answer on that.
I mean, it's just
I believe that okay. I'm going to break it down for you. There's, first of all, you have to define structural racism. So I think what you mean is like, if you're saying, are there still policies that inhibit black people from getting ahead?
yeah, like for example, like discrimination in hiring practices, or like admissions that show preferential treatment to legacies, as both of you mentioned, is a thing at high academic institutions.
I think there's bias. Diva Pager, who's a Harvard University social scientist, produced, I think, probably the most compelling study of this. I haven't really been able to debunk it yet. I wish I could. But she basically did a study in Michigan where there were she basically acted. She had actors who were black and who were white, and they all interviewed for the same job, and some of them had a criminal record and some of them didn't. And the black person without a criminal record had fewer callbacks than the white person who had a criminal record. So yeah, I mean, I think that's there's a couple of controlling factors you have to control for. It hasn't been replicated super well. The replication has been mixed, but you know, it was a Midwestern city. It was Minneapolis. There are a lot of issues that are going on in other places. So I think that there's some evidence to suggest that there's bias, but I think that's why that's why the university system is like so important towards being the vanguard of meritocracy. Like, if the university system is known for vast preferences and it's known for, I guess, what you call it, relaxed standards for certain populations, then the value of the degree, the value of the credential, which is basically a symbol of merit, it's a universally accepted symbol of merit in society, that value is going to degrade. And then you're going to start having patients saying, well, this doctor graduated, but it was affirmative action. Was he a DEI doctor or not? That's why, because I want to protect the rights and advancement of Black people and all minorities who go through the university system, that is the reason why I don't want universities to relax their standards. It's to protect against bias, not the other way around.
Okay. I'll just ask, you said bias, we could call it, I'll call it structural inequality, structural racism. So if you have these long-standing biases or long-standing, structural hindrances to economic mobility, however you want to put it, what do you think is the antidote if it isn't policy focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because this is also just an opinion. I think that, as Mbye pointed out, this quote-unquote return to meritocracy is a farce because, once that was kind of what was being said, there was actually people who had less merit being put in the same positions. So what do you think is the appropriate way to go about, not I guess doing DEI, but addressing some things that have, historically barred people from equal access to various parts of their lives?
So think about the implications of what you just said. The return to meritocracy is a farce. Think about if, quote unquote, think about if that quote were true. I'm not personalizing it. Think about if that quote were true. Meritocracy is a farce. That would mean that people who go through pilot certification programs to get their pilot's license should not be treated any differently than someone who didn't get their pilot license. That means that somebody who went through medical school, who did the hours, who did all of those things, is not more qualified. You have to have a system where the most qualified are the ones that are promoted, and I'm trying to build that better system.
I think that's exactly what you're saying last farce, when you say the most qualified, and Pete Hegseth is your defense secretary, and RFK Jr. is Health and Human Services secretary. You have, once again, a podcaster that's number 2 in the FBI. You fired 4-star generals for 3-star generals. That's what he's saying. So where is the meritocracy in all of these hires when they all are less qualified than every single person in the history of this country in their position to hold that spot before, whether Democrat or Republican? And they're telling us it's not meritocracy. Pete Hegseth sitting here tells us about meritocracy, but he's the one that takes away the webpage for the DEI Medal of Honor guy, right? He hasn't had any of that kind of level of combat services, so that's what he's talking about. If you're going to tell us about meritocracy, don't put people that are less qualified than anybody in the history of this country in those positions and tell us they earned it.
Yeah, how do you return to true meritocracy without implementing those biases that we've seen throughout history over and over and over?
Okay, just to respond to what he said. Okay, so we agree that meritocracy is a value, because you're attacking, I guess, my party for not being meritocratic.
Absolutely, and then yelling at everybody else about meritocracy. You're telling everybody else about merits, and I'm watching you not follow your own words about making it not about merit specifically.
Okay, so when Joe Biden said, I'm going to pick a Black woman justice to be a justice of the Supreme Court, is that meritocracy?
What was her resume? What was her resume? Please tell me, what was her resume? Outside of her black skin, what was her resume?
It was Harvard Law School.
And what else?
She was a district court of appeals justice.
And what else? In which court? The D.C. Circuit, right? Which
Yeah,
is
the
second
D.C.
one
Circuit.
After the Supreme Court. So she had earned her way up all these positions. So she happened to be black, but her resume, her work, shows she beyond qualified for it. Now, Amy Coney Barrett, on the other hand, did she go through all of those steps? Did she have any of that same resume? No. And did we say anything when at that time is we're going to replace her with a woman? What was your party saying about that when Trump promised to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg with, no, not Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what's her name? The little RBG. When he promised with a woman, your party didn't say, oh no, you replaced her with a woman. He promised a woman at that time, but when it's a black woman, now it's all she's not qualified because she just went through her qualifications and you saw that she was one of the most qualified people for that position at that time.
I'm not afraid to say, I'm not like suddenly afraid to say that Ketanji Brown Jackson wasn't qualified. I wasn't arguing against that. I was arguing against Joe Biden, who was saying, I'm going to choose a black woman justice, as if that was the thing that he needed to say at the time. Why would he say something like that? He wants to cater to his own progressive base who is going, we need X race in this position right now, and we demand it, we force it. That's what I'm criticizing. I'm not criticizing her qualifications, which I know are very strong and true. I'm criticizing the way that party, the Democratic Party, is formed and the way that they use their messaging to trumpet an anti-meritocratic ideology.
Trump did the same thing with Amy Coney Barrett. He legitimately said, I'm going to hire a woman to replace her.
Yeah, I didn't agree with that.
First, I want to thank both of you for your time today and for allowing us to be a part of this conversation with you. So, I'm a senior here at Davidson, and every day I'm reminded of how we are a small liberal arts college who prides itself not only on academics, but also our culture. There are several clubs, teams, organizations, and events that are specifically made possible because of this college's mission to promote diversity among its student body. College, for many people, is the closest some students get to be able to genuinely engage with cultures, perspectives, and ideas different from their own on their own. And so, in a future without DEI policies in place, I feel as if this institution will be giving up its ability to allow our small community to be able to remain lively and a highly active and engaged community. I feel like in the same way that we students benefit from universities, the universities also benefit from us. So do you feel like, and this is for either one of you, do you feel like there are going to be anything sacrificed with the removal of DEI policies besides academics?
Yes, I think there will be a lot sacrificed. When I think about when I got here at Davidson, we didn't have that many policies to help minority students or students of color. My class was the first class that was predominantly black students from public schools. So we were the first ones that weren't a bunch of black kids from private schools. We didn't have the same level of support that students have today. So when I talk about things that have helped improve the student experience, back then, black students used to get sent to honor code a lot more than white kids. And it could be the same exact thing, same exact mistakes you've seen. And most of the time it came out of 2 or 3 of the same teachers sending these students there. Some of these things put in place started curbing those numbers, started curbing that happening. Same with graduation rates, right? So some of that stuff. Same thing with the stuff that the school has done now to help students get them prepared for after college, after school. So I left Davidson, I did a ton of stuff while I was here. My name is outside on one of the boards right now. Like, I left with a decent GPA. When I got out of Davidson, I had to go work door-to-door sales. I didn't have people helping me get ready to go into banking or into any other thing like that. Like, I was overqualified for door-to-door sales. Like, I had Davidson come like, you shouldn't be here, you know? But that was the option that I had to me, unlike other people there. But now these policies that were put in place have now helped students here currently. When they leave here, they don't have those same worries. I hope we don't have students here graduating now being, well, I gotta go sell these brain stickers at this now, you know, door to door. But that's, some of these policies have helped them, and inherently that has now helped Davidson. Because these are the same students that are gonna come back, put money back into the school, volunteer back for the school, and help the next generation of the school grow even better. So I think those things inherently have made not just the academic experience for Davidson a whole lot better, but just your whole overall experience as a student getting what you guys should have fully gotten, that my class and my generation never got to experience.
I had a Davidson experience, and it was a good one. I am blessed to be a part of Davidson. I was a senior at Davidson College. I was a freshman at Davidson College, and I had a residence hall assistant, and she was a sophomore at the time. I was just a freshman. I didn't know anything. But I loved the Washington Redskins because I was from Richmond. So I came in and I wore my Redskins cap, and she had this seminar where everybody had to present on their quote unquote cultural heritage. And I thought, cultural heritage, what's my culture? Well, yeah, I could talk about the fact that I'm Chinese American, but everybody wants to know about the fact that I'm Chinese American. Everybody does know that I'm Chinese American. And everybody will continue asking me questions about that for the rest of my life. So I wanted to say something a little different. I wanted to talk about how I was proud to be an American. How I was proud I was a football fan, and how I grew up in Virginia. And I talked about that. And I thought it was fine. And if people clapped politely, and then the residence hall advisor started arguing with me. And she started saying, I don't think that you should be respecting this country. And I said, you don't know me at all. Like, you know zero about me. And you have the gall to tell me that I don't know anything and I have nothing to be thankful for? And that was a moment of awakening for me. I was not political. I declared math. I was a math major. I wrote it through the whole way through. But when I say that there's a problem, it's because I believe that there's a problem. And I know that my experience isn't the same. And so I want diversity and I want inclusion as a principle, but I'm going to quote an unnamed professor who told me the other day, we need DEI 2.0. We can't have DEI 1.0. We need something better. And I think that we're all going to be in charge of that, and I'm proud to be a part of this journey.
All right, thank you all, everybody, for coming. We're going to go ahead and call it here, but I'm sure both parties would stick around and answer any personal questions if you all want to come find them. Let's give one more round of applause for these guys coming up here and taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Good seeing you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice work. Hey, phenomenal. Good seeing you.
I had another question.
Yeah.
So, I was looking into the Harvard versus SFFA
Yeah.
case, and I saw like there was a decrease in the admissions of Asian American students. Like after they overturned like the use of what they call preferential treatment for. I think the main argument is like black students. Like, what do you say to that? Do you think that suggests that like DEI favoring black students is actually untrue, or like, not really what it seems to be?
No, I like that you brought that up. I think the data that we used was from 2017, and so it hasn't been updated since then. And so we need the data. I mean, why did Asians go down? Did their average SAT scores applying to Harvard go down? Was it related to merit, or was it Harvard being vindictive and saying, okay, well, we don't have DEI anymore, but screw those Asian students and Edward Bloom, the plaintiff, for filing this case, we're going to lower admissions to Asian students anyway. And that kind of proves my point, because Harvard's admission system is so screwed up and such a black box that it's conceivable that they might actually do something like that.
So there was actually a few other schools. Duke also saw like a decrease. Same thing with Yale. So that's why I felt like it couldn't have been like a vindictive thing.
No, send me the data. I'll read it.
All right, for sure.
I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. You know where to find me, right? Okay, good. Hi. Hey,
I was
Ike.
like, thank you for that shit.
No, thank you for being a part of it. Hi. Thank you for being a part of it. Good seeing you.
So not as much here, but I have a friend who attends Georgia Tech, which is a public school.
Cool.
It's actually predominantly Asian, which is really cool.
Yeah, I know that. I know Georgia Tech.
So I'm like dismantling the sort of DEI federally. they're receiving less funding towards like organizations like BSA, LGBTQ, presumably ASA. And so I'm just wondering if that's like, how does that fall into all of this?
Funding for what, sorry?
Like student groups like BSA, LGBT,
Yeah.
etc.
So right now, Davidson funds programs through the Center for Political Engagement, right? And then also the Center for Religion and Spiritual Life. Who are the heads of those? They, when I was a student at Davidson, the Center for Political Engagement, we asked them 3 years in a row, can you give Young Americans for Freedom, which is the club that I started at the time, some money, like $2,000. We had to raise all the money ourselves. Could you give us like $2,000, $4,000 like you were giving the other ones? No. Every time we got no. So I want everybody, and that was wrong. But to this day, chapters around Davidson face the same problem, regardless if they're the Muslim Student Association or Young Americans for Freedom or whatever. So you have to build a system that is fair. That's why I'm against DEI, because I'm for fairness. I do think that when you stress certain kinds of diversity, you exclude other kinds, unless you're careful. You can do it carefully, but I don't think we've been as careful as we could have been.
Thank you.
Yeah, what's your name?
Taylor.
Taylor, okay. Nice to meet you. Hey.
Hey, what's going on?
Good.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Yes, incidental and like when exactly was the period? Yes, like which we were like actually like basing everything on. It's like when was that period?
When was that period?
Yeah.
Not during slavery, not during, I think Martin Luther King's spirit was trying to make it more civil rights friendly.
Right.
I think we're getting better.
Yeah.
I think it's closer to now than it was in 1850. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Yes. We agree on that. Yeah, though, in terms of that, yes, in terms of that, like your argument was, yes, in terms of that, like was for us to like return to a period of merit, is what you said.
I didn't say return.
Yes, you did.
I'll check the tape.
Yes, please do, because you said that like a couple of times.
I think
That's all
DEI's
I'm
gone too
asking you,
far.
right?
I think DEI's gone too far. The Duke Chronicle survey said it. The Harvard case said it. The blowback to the anti-racism training said it. So yeah, I think that in those cases we have to return. Yeah, we have to return.
Where?
Return to colorblind admissions, name blind, race blind. The way that Thomas Jefferson